Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir, and joining me as always is my co-host, Austin Davidson.
Heyo.
It is Season 5, Episode 8. Austin, happy Saturday to you. I know what day it is today.
Happy Saturday to you and to our listeners that when this probably goes up, happy Sunday, happy Easter Sunday if you celebrate. If you don't, have a happy Sunday.
Indeed. And as we are all still adjusting to this very difficult time for everyone around the country and around the world, the NFL draft is still projected to take place, not this coming Thursday, but the following Thursday. The 23rd is going to be the first day of it, so we've got a good amount of work to get to until then. So we're going to be starting today with, of course, the defensive line, interior defensive line, where the Steelers lost probably their most important piece in free agency in Javon Hargrave. And why don't we start with him? A 3-year, $39 million deal to the Philadelphia Eagles. We've talked about him a bit, but what exactly are the Steelers losing in a player like him?
They're losing a luxury, a guy that can be a top 5 defensive tackle. I think I'm willing to say that with the Eagles. I think that someone laughed at me for saying that. I said that I think that Javon Hargrave is a top 5 tackle in the league, and he just didn't get the stats because the Steelers didn't have the starting spot for him because he only played 40 to 60% of snaps. Someone laughed at me, but I truly think that losing Javon Hargrave is big, and I can't wait for all the comments that from me, because Eagle fans are like literally like the worst. They're like, can't believe you let Javon Hargrave go. We knew it. We know. We understand. I think that he's going to be a 10-sack guy with the Eagles, and that's big. That's a big statement. 10 sacks from the defensive tackle position is not easy. It's Aaron Donald-like, which I don't. Being careful with that. I don't think Javon Hargrave is Aaron Donald, but I do think he's a top 5 defensive tackle in this league, and I think that with starting time with the Eagles, I think that he could really achieve that in those numbers. So I think losing him is a huge deal. It's losing such a nice luxury of a great defensive tackle, and it kind of sucks.
Yeah, and he really was. That's the thing, is that he truly was a nose guard with the Pittsburgh Steelers, but he has that body and physique to be able to play maybe more naturally a 4-3 tackle position, and I think he has a chance to be even better than what he was here. And remember, again, even though he wasn't playing a ton, his pressure rate was one of the highest in the league.
Yeah, he's ridiculous. He's really good, and people probably didn't respect him as a Steeler because he didn't get the stats as much. He didn't put up – people think that he played 100% of the snaps, and those were his stats, which are okay stats. But I think he's going to unlock his full potential with Philadelphia.
And remember, a lot of the snaps he did play over the years were due to injuries to Stephon Tuitt and Cameron Hayward. So the one year, I think it was 2017, even when Tuitt was injured, he still played through most of his season. Hargrave only played, I think, 38% of the snaps. So that's how much he would have been normally used in Pittsburgh. So it's possible that he would have been making even less of a household name. But I agree, losing him was big. And I think that going into this whole draft process, now that the Steelers have filled holes at other positions, I've kind of looked at this thinking, I guess it depends on how the Steelers view the nose tackle, but I think that it's quite possible they view it as a starting position. I'm not saying that they do, but it's possible they look at it as a starting position, and if so, that's the biggest hole on the team right now, if they do consider the nose tackle to be a starter, because they don't have a true starter there. I mean, they have Daniel McCullers, who has long since been a backup that we've all been calling for to be cut for years, and right now he's the starter.
Yeah, and that's not ideal. And for those thinking that Chris Wormley can be that they denied that. They said that Chris Wormley, they view him as a defensive end in set. So Chris Wormley is not going to be that guy either. So like John said, Daniel McCullers is the only guy there. I mean, Cameron Hayward shaped up for that, but that's not his position. So, I mean, the Steelers don't have a true nose tackle at the moment.
Yeah, I really think in a pinch, honestly, all of the main guys on the roster could play there in a pinch, but you're not going to be putting them in their best position, obviously, besides Daniel McCullers, if you're placing them there. And there are some familiar faces like Henry Mondeau returning on a futures deal. And I believe, is that Savon Walker? I've heard that's how you say his name from the New York Guardians.
Kayvon?
Savon.
Or Savon?
Savon. That's how I've heard it, is Savon.
Really? I being honest with you, I didn't watch Guardians games. I only followed the score, so I don't know. I know he led the what's it called? I know he led the league in sacks, and he is from that the defensive tackle position, the nose tackle, but I'm not actually sure.
Well, obviously, we'll have plenty of time to figure that out, but I think of all the XFL signings, I think this guy may have the best opportunity to stick around on like the practice squad or something, because the active roster is relatively full, but I think that he has a chance to stick around for a little while.
Yeah, there's a chance. I mean, he's the only other defensive tackle on the team right now, or true defensive tackle at least. So, I mean, he's got a good shot right now. And, I mean, Daniel McCullers has been a coach's favorite, but he's not been a fan favorite, that's for sure.
And even though he's still been a quote-unquote coach's favorite, there's still a reason he plays less than 10 snaps a game.
Exactly. Like, he's not – the coaches just really want him to be great because of his size, but it's just not going to happen. And that's why I think they keep holding on to him, hoping that this is going to be the year that he finally breaks out, but because he's just so big, but I don't think it's going to happen.
So as of today, we have 8 prospects that we're looking at as interior defensive linemen. Austin, I'll go first with my the overview of my 4 guys. I have I'm starting with Leki Fotu from Utah. He's closer to a more prototypical nose tackle or interior defensive lineman, and Rashard Lawrence, the national champion from LSU, is similar in that ilk. Then the other 2 players I have are Nick Coe from Auburn, who is technically an edge defender, but his body type projects him as more of a 3-4 defensive lineman. So I looked at him as an interior guy. And then last I had Malcolm Roach, who actually split time between 3-4 defensive end and edge 3-4 linebacker. He actually had a season where he split all 10 of his games between 5 starts at both positions, which was kind of interesting. But he, again, is one of those guys that projects more like a defensive lineman on a 3-4. So I had a good mix of guys. As far as the 4 players you looked at, just a little insight into them before we have a deep analysis on them.
Sure. First, I have Justin Madibuke. He's from Texas A&M. He was a DT, like straight up. Basically, all my guys are DT. Ross Blacklock from TCU. He's a DT, like I said. Then after him, I have Benito Jones from Mississippi. He's more of a true. He's a DT as well, but he's more of a true DT. The first 2 are more pass rushing nose tackles, and then I have Robert Windsor from Penn State, and he is more of like a defensive end. He is a DT, but I'm not sure how he's going to be used at the next level. I feel like he might be better to the defensive end, but we'll see. And then if we have time, this is not happening today, but I started on Broderick Washington, but I ran out of time. So we will, if we have time by the end of this, when we get close to the draft, I'll probably look at him and maybe another prospect, not specifically a defensive tackle, but like sort of like a little Moz Podge of players if I have time, because I started on him. But yeah, I had him as well.
Alrighty. Is there a particular player that you wanted to start with, or do you want me to start today? Do you have an opinion?
How about you start today? I started the last time.
All right, good idea. All right. I'm going to start from the other end. Normally I start with my top guy, but I'm going to go the opposite direction this time. And I'm going to start with Malcolm Roach, a senior from Texas, weighing in at 297 pounds and standing at 6'2". It sounds very similar to what Casey Hampton profiled, obviously not quite as heavy, but that's kind of what I was thinking when I was looking at him originally, and then I saw his tape and I saw like that he actually played linebacker too, but I'll get to that in a moment. Roach obviously played at Texas, but his father Mike actually was an All-American linebacker at SMU, Southern Methodist, back in the day, and he was also that whole lineman-linebacker split I was talking about. He was doing that all 4 years in high school, so he's played a lot of linebacker and defensive line over his career, and he played right away in his freshman year of 2016, playing in 12 games. He actually started, that was the year with the 10 starts at linebacker, or 10 starts, 5 at linebacker and 5 at defensive end. He had 33 tackles and 8 for a loss and 3 sacks. 2017, he had 3 starts in 12 games, 2 at linebacker, 1 at DN, with 37 tackles, 2 sacks, and 4 tackles for a loss. He fractured his foot in 2018 and only started in 8 games because of it, but again, 5 starts at defensive end and 3 at linebacker with 24 tackles and a tackle for a loss. And then last year, he was an honorable mention All Big 12 player with 13 starts in games, all at defensive end, with 9 of his 40 tackles going for a loss, 3 sacks, and blocked 1 field goal. So as far as Malcolm Roach goes, the things that you like to see is that he was a beloved teammate and respected by pretty much everyone as a true leader for the team. He received the most votes of any player in 2019 to be a team captain. He has a powerful body, and his work in the weight room over the years has shown his gradual improvement, and I can attest that he did improve over time from the games that I saw. He has a pretty good get-off. He fires into his opponent with a heavy interior hand strike and has a pretty good strong and wide base with natural leverage due to his shorter height. And although he wasn't asked to play as a nose often, he did do it relatively sufficiently when he was asked to do so. And he was also probably most effective when asked to be a slanting 4-3 defensive tackle. And again, he played mostly on the outside in either a 3-man front or an outside linebacker. So he was a versatile player at Texas. He also has strong hands, and that quick get-off that I mentioned before allowed him to make a handful of plays in the backfield over the years. The negatives for Malcolm Roach, though, his body size, that 6'2" and 297 pounds I was talking about. I had mentioned Casey Hampton because it reminds me more of like a nose tackle or an interior defensive lineman, maybe a little undersized, but he could beef up. And the problem is he rarely played there. So he'd need to probably go through a full body makeover just to become an effective nose, because even though he carries that weight well, he was playing as a linebacker a lot. Not really this past season, but in the past he had been a linebacker almost as much, if not more, than a defensive end. So if he doesn't really have the athleticism to be an outside linebacker or an edge player, so he's going to have to move inside, and that's not something he's ready to do right now. And really, he just never made much of an impact on games as it really felt like he should have. And this is something that I really saw in my tape as well. He doesn't have a high motor. I'm not sure if that's due to poor endurance or just plainly giving up on the play. He really becomes a liability whenever the play is extended. And despite the good strength and technique that he showed at times, he has short arms and small hands. That's going to limit his effectiveness overall in the NFL level. And because of that, he struggles to shed blocks, and that's also going to be an issue. And also, he struggles to move laterally. Change of direction is not his forte. So, all in all, when I was looking at the tape, I saw his games against Oklahoma, the Big 12 championship game 2 years ago, games against LSU this year and Oklahoma State this year. And Lance Zierlein from NFL.com, who did his draft profile, said, and I quote, "While Roach did what was asked of him at Texas, it was pretty rare that you could feel his presence in terms of taking a game over or even a half over. And honestly, if that isn't spot on, I don't know what is. Roach's impact felt similar to that of what, again, a very light Casey Hampton was like in the NFL. And that was almost that you never notice him. And Hampton did his job as a run-stuffing defensive tackle. The thing is, in college, they aren't running the ball as much as they used to. Those types of players really aren't as useful in the NFL anymore. And if he's not noticeable in college, then that's an issue, especially when you consider that he wasn't a nose tackle. He was a 3-4 defensive end. He was an edge rusher. He should have had more of an impact in these games, and honestly, he offered practically nothing in terms of a pass rusher and overall motor. And what's wild to me is that his body measurables suggest he could possibly be a 0-3 technique in a pinch, or at least could split time as an interior defender at the NFL level. But because he almost never played that position in college, and he just offered very little outside of doing just well enough, I just don't know how he's going to be able to transition to that position in the NFL. I just don't see anything overly positive with him personally. Nothing against him, but I just don't know how someone's getting draft type based on the games I watched. To me, he's just a undrafted free agent camp body type of guy. Not even a priority undrafted free agent. But he could still catch on to a practice squad because of his position flexibility. And again, he's a good locker room guy. And he could morph into a similar player to a Leki Fotu type body, if that happens, he'll have a chance, but I just don't see it. It's going to take a little while at best. So this is a guy I would stay away from in the draft right now. Again, nothing personal. It's just how I feel about Malcolm Roach from Texas. Would you like to go ahead with your first prospect?
Hello?
Hello there. Can you hear me?
Oh, sorry. My bad.
You're good.
So, my first prospect is going to be Justin Madubuike from Texas A&M. He's 6'3" and 293 pounds. The 5-star recruit from McKinney, Texas, committed to Texas A&M coming out of high school, playing 13 games as a backup and getting 20 tackles, 2.5 for loss, and a forced fumble. The following year, he took his game to the next level, winning his team's defensive MVP award after starting 12 of 13 games, leading the team in forced fumbles and sacks with 3 and 6.5 respectively, while also having 10.5 tackles for loss on his 40 tackles. As a junior, he was finally able to get recognition for his play, earning second-team All-SEC accolades for his team, leaving 11.5 tackles for a loss and 5.5 sacks, while also having 45 total tackles, an interception, 2 additional pass breakups, and a blocked kick through 11 starts in 12 games. He decided to forego Texas A&M's Senior Bowl and forego his senior season to declare for the draft early. So the first thing I liked about him is that his athleticism was out of this world. He may not have been a top performer at the combine besides in the bench press, but it feels like his play speed is there. He plays with twitchy feet, and it makes him look athletic. Enough to be able to close out interior runners at the least. He also has build-up power and uses good leverage to be able to overtake his blocker during the rep. Lance Zierlein says he believes he's going to become a more toolsy pass rusher once he gets to the NFL. But he already has a pretty solid spin counter that helps him get out of blocks. He also has quick hands that he strikes on the inside that will help him get off blocks as well. Then lastly, he plays with a good pad level and bends and twists to knife himself into gaps. So going to the negative side, I found out the worst thing about him was his initial come up off the ball. He frequently came up late while he mostly made it work in college, if he wants to make it at the NFL level, he's going to have to be quicker off the ball. The slowness getting off the ball leads him to lose some power overall when getting into contact, and he really struggles recovering when his opponent had a stiff punch off the snap. Then there are some physical concerns with his frame, length, and size, where he looks to face size limitations in the NFL with the smaller, lean frame he has, and he could be maxed out. He might be able to add some more muscle to his legs, but otherwise he may not be able to put much more on. You could sort of see the leg strength not being as good as his arm strength, too, mostly while he's getting double teamed where he can get completely flattened, and also he gets redirected off his rush track at times. So Lance Zierlein compared him to Devin Godchaux, but I'm going to compare him to a more familiar face, a very familiar face, actually. Watching him reminded me of Javon Hargrave. They play very alike, and they were both considered undersized coming in. Also, the speed is comparable with Madubuike, running slightly faster. Now, to me, I feel like a lot of his negatives aren't that bad. And that while it may be difficult to add a little bit more mass, I think he can do it. And with NFL coaching, he can get more tools under his belt as well as try to work through the slowness off the ball. So I actually gave Madubuike a late round 1 grade. And maybe it's just because he's reminding me of Hargrave and is causing some bias, but I generally thought his tape was good. He's shown this production for 2 seasons now. Still, though, the consensus for most people is that he is not a first-rounder. I've seen a lot of people opting to put my next prospect at the end of the first round instead. The only other person I saw give him a first-round grade was Walter Football, but I'm going to stick to my guns here, as there's always a surprise to people. I think he is going to go to late first round. I think he's going to be the surprise guy that wasn't in many mock drafts. He might get into the first round. So that was Justin Madubuike out of Texas A&M. I watched his games against Arkansas in 2019 versus Mississippi State in 2019 and versus Auburn in 2018, as well as his highlights. Who is your next prospect?
All right, I am going to be taking a look at now Nick Coe from Auburn. He's a redshirt junior, 6'5" and 280 pounds. So he's actually an edge defender, but because of that body, I think that he's more likely to kick inside when he gets to the NFL. So a little bit about Nick Coe. He was from New Jersey, played football in high school, but he was also an all-state wrestling champion in high school, so that's kind of interesting. He got to Auburn with the Tigers and redshirted his freshman year of 2016, and then made the SEC All-Freshman team his second season, which was his redshirt freshman season of 2017. Starting one game, played in 14, had 4.5 of his 29 tackles for a loss with 2 sacks. Then started 10 of 11 games in 2018. He lost the last 2 games of his season due to wrist surgery on his right wrist in 2018. He was still pretty productive. Of his 27 tackles, 13.5 were for a loss. He had 7 sacks and 2 forced fumbles. And then last year, he lost his starting job and only had 1 start in 11 games, had 15 tackles and 3 tackles for a loss. He was benched for a game, according to Gus Malzahn, the head coach, and it was for, quote, not meeting our standard in practice this week. So that's a little concerning to see. But let's continue actually with the negatives first for Nick Coe right now. He plays with a pretty narrow base from what I saw. That'll neutralize his strength and make him a lot easier to be knocked down, and this happened a lot. He got moved around by linemen way too often in the run game, and on pass plays that broke down, similar to Malcolm Roach that I just talked about, he just becomes a pedestrian. He's not going to help you. He's going to be a liability. And also, he was a guy that used his athleticism to win as a pass rusher in college. He's not a good technical rusher. Also, he's just not very agile. He struggles with change of direction when reeling in the quarterback, and he lost out on a few sacks because of it. He's more frantic and uncoordinated on the edge with poor footwork as well. He also, similar to what you were just talking about, Austin, this is kind of crucial. He doesn't get a good jump off the line of scrimmage. You know, he was a good athlete, and he could make up for that by being quick at certain points, but that's only going to get him so far at the NFL level. Again, he doesn't profile just like Malcolm Roach as an edge rusher in the NFL. He's more likely to be a solid 3-4 defensive end by adding some bulk and becoming a little more polished as far as his technique goes. Also, there was a bizarre play against LSU, one of the games that I watched, where he was out of position, or one of the linebackers on the team told him to move across the line, so he got up from his spot and was moving across the line. He was going like behind linebackers, behind the linemen, near the linebackers to get to his spot. And then running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who Austin looked at earlier in this process, ran past where he was previously to score a touchdown. And Coe was not in position to make a tackle. It was like a 7-yard touchdown run. He probably would not have stopped him. But if he had dove and tried to make a diving effort, he might have been able to at least trip him up or something like that. He just stood there and watched him run into the end zone. That to me was just an issue. I didn't like that. That was a bad look for me. As far as the positives, though, go, he's got a good frame with solid mass and could still add more strength to his frame. Coe took on wham and kick-out blocks well on the edge. He can set the edge at times, depending on the type of offensive lineman he's facing. He's got strong arms, a strong arm chop and slap. That helps keeps the blocker's hands off of him and gives him the opportunity to make his move on the edge. And even though he was an edge defender, he does have experience moving up and down the line with his hand in the dirt and in a 2-point stance. He often won battles against even the best blocking tight ends in college, including one of my guys, Charlie Warner at Georgia, who I just recently talked about. And he also has experience two-gapping interior linemen, but also can set the edge when asked to. He's also a pretty hard hitter, too, so that's something that you like to see from someone that has that nasty level on the defensive side of the ball. So Nick Coe, in conclusion, he's got NFL size and strength, but his primary position of edge rusher in college is probably not one he can do at the NFL level. He's simply not fast or quick enough to play it, and because of that, he's going to probably have to kick inside to a 3-4 interior lineman, and he doesn't have nearly enough experience in that spot, meaning he's more of a project player right now. If he does go to the right team, with the right fit, he can be a solid backup or rotational guy, but I just don't see an overly dominant player on tape. He's intriguing, but not one that I think is going to be impactful, certainly not off the bat, and he's not a nose tackle, not right now anyways. I see him as an early day 3 guy that could go by the end of the 5th round, I believe, at the latest. So that was Nick Coe. I watched his games against Georgia in 2017, Ole Miss in 2018, and LSU in 2019. So I saw 3 different seasons of him playing. So good little spread there. So that was Nick Coe from Auburn. Austin, is your next player Ross Blacklock?
It is Mr. Blacklock. He's from TCU. He is 6'3" and 290 pounds. I just want to put out appreciation for that name, man. That name goes hard. I think of Ross Blacklock, and I'm like, wow, that man sounds like he's going to tear up a football field. That was my first thought, and I just wanted to throw that out there. While he doesn't have a football connection, his dad, Jimmy Blacklock, is in the University of Texas Hall of Fame for basketball and played with the Harlem Globetrotters through the 80s and has now been head coach for the team for 5 years. Blacklock was one of those rare freshmen, I'm now talking about Ross, I should say, that came on and immediately played big. He was able to get a freshman All-American and Big 12 co-defensive freshman of the year accolades for 27 tackles, 6.5 for a loss, and 2 sacks through 14 starts. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to follow up in 2018 after suffering an ACL tear that ended his season early. Following the injury through the rehab, he dropped down 25 pounds and returned better than ever, earning first-team All-Big 12 honors for 40 tackles, 9 for a loss, and 3.5 sacks through 12 starts. After rebounding big after a huge injury, he decided to forego his senior season and declare for the draft. And I'm going to follow you. You went negatives first. I'll go negatives first for Blacklock. So similar to Matabuke, he's also undersized. He actually weighs less at the same height, if you were paying attention to that. He doesn't have the length issues, but still, there's room to add on some more muscle mass for Blacklock. Now, something I worry about is his snap count. He didn't play very much in games. So little, actually, I decided to watch 4 games for him. As his game against Purdue, he was only on the field for 4.5 minutes worth of snaps. West Virginia was just over 6 minutes and 30. It concerns me that he may not be able to handle the NFL workload. With that being said, I don't know if it's from the ACL tear or what, but he may not be able to play that many snaps without getting gassed. Speaking of that ACL tear, because of that and him deciding to forego his senior season, there's only one great season under Blacklock's belt. So that's of concern as well. It might have been a one-year wonder. Then watching him was frustrating at times. He would have his man beat and push back and just wouldn't be able to turn that pressure into sacks. However, where I believe he needs the most work is his hand fighting. If he can improve his hand placement as well as the angle he takes, he can an even quicker shed and would win a lot more battles. Because of right now, and again similar to Justin, he loses a lot of momentum when he gets a stiff punch right off the bat. I also saw him struggle a lot more against interior power, like in West Virginia. Number 74, and I'm sorry if I messed this up, James Gmitter. Maybe it's just Mitter. It's spelled with a G in the beginning. It's Gmiter. He was a redshirt freshman, and I looked him up. He did well against Blacklock because he's got that interior power. Then while he is he has been pretty successful against double teams. A mistake he still makes is that he drops his head into double teams a lot. Last couple things are that he struggles to keep pads square on the move, and he ends up getting put on the ground more than you'd want. So now we'll do his positive. Watching his tape, the man gets double-teamed a lot. Essentially the whole game versus Purdue, he was double-teamed, and then a lot in other games he played in. So I was very impressed with the stats he was able to put up despite that. Literally the entire game against Purdue, he was getting 2 men on him because they couldn't handle him by himself. The few snaps that he was by himself, he was destroying whatever poor guard he was going against. He was really, really tearing up that game against Purdue. He's got a lot going for him to make that happen. Opposed to Matabuke, he actually has a good initial quickness, and it gives him that extra gas right in the beginning. It allows him to quickly find a hole in double team blocks, and uses athleticism and agility to be able to make it through. And I know he was called for targeting on this play against West Virginia. If any of you happen to watch the plays I'm talking about against West Virginia from Blacklock, but if you just watch his last 2 plays against West Virginia, he gets through a double team block on a 3-man pass rush on the first play. He was one of the only 3 people that they had to block. And on the second, he runs straight through again, that time getting a 4-man rush. But, geez, I don't know if West Virginia's line is just bad. But, I mean, they were playing well throughout the entire game. Like I said, like the guard 74 was actually doing well up until that point. He got through on double team blocks twice in a row. Combining this quickness, athleticism, and agility with his relentless demeanor and elite lateral quickness and direction-changing abilities, it makes him nearly impossible to mirror with just one offensive lineman. He really has the rush instincts of a defensive end, and that's probably because more than a handful of times he was actually asked to play defensive end in certain packages. So he has that going for him as well. Then as for his hand fighting, he plays with fast hands and has used a sudden arm over on opponents. Last couple things that he plays at a consistently good pad level and shows he can change both his speed and stride length to open up space for him when pulling. So overall, Lance Zierlein compared him to Giants B.J. Hill, but I don't see it at all. But I don't have a comparison for him. Blacklock is interesting. With how little Javon Hargrave played percentage stats-wise, it eliminates a problem that other teams may have had with Blacklock, where they may view it as they can't play him much. It's also a risk taking him. He has 1 year of production behind him. I think if he stayed in school one more year, he could have actually been a top 12 pick in the following year's draft. But now teams have to bet on that 1 year. It's following an ACL tear, so it's pretty rough. I mean, he did rebound, but I'm going to give him a late first-round grade because there's a lot of risk involved. I think he's going to go in the second round, but predicting where Blacklock was going to go took me the longest of any prospect I've ever looked at. I really struggled to get a read on where he'll go. Because he could sneak into the first round. A lot of mock drafts have him right at the end of the first round and maybe going in the first few picks in the second. But he was really hard to get a read on because at times I felt like, wow, this guy feels like a top 15 pick in the draft. But then I had to remember, well, that was only one season, and he also is coming off an ACL tear, and he's not playing many snaps, so maybe he's less tired than a standard DT was. So then I go back and forth, and I'm like, well, he's beating double team blocks like the way he is. It was really tough. I had to really sit and think on where I thought he was going to go. And again, I think he will fall into the second round. But I'm not positive on that. So that was Ross Blacklock from TCU. I watched his game versus Texas in 2019, versus Baylor in 2019, versus Purdue in 2019, versus West Virginia in 2019, as well as his highlights. So who is your next prospect that you would like to talk about?
Alrighty, next I have Rashard Lawrence, the national champion from LSU. Lawrence was a former top 20 recruit nationwide, and he signed on with the Tigers and immediately played in 9 games in 2016, starting 4 games. And he actually had 1 sack that season, and it was of Lamar Jackson in the Citrus Bowl, so that was impressive for him. And teammates loved him because they named him a team captain the following season. Started in 10 games, finishing with 32 tackles, 3.5 for a loss, and 1.5 sacks. Then started 13 games with 54 tackles, 10.5 for loss, 4.5 sacks, and 3 pass breakups. Had 2 sacks against UCF in the Fiesta Bowl. UCF at the time had not lost a game in 2+ seasons, so that's pretty impressive right there. And then this past season, he was second team All-SEC, playing in 12 games, starting 11 while he recovered from an ankle injury. Had 28 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, 3 pass breakups, and as I mentioned before, a national champion. Going to go back to the positives with Rashard Lawrence to start. He has a wide and thick frame that carries sufficient weight, and he has proportional strength to go with it. He has a high tolerance for pain. He played through a lot of different nicks and bruises and bumps that he had throughout his college career. He's one of those high-character, team-first kind of guys that teammates love, and he has a great work ethic to go with it. Another guy that, even though he probably could have rushed the passer more throughout his college career, he kind of did what Aaron Smith did throughout his NFL career, where he was more of a guy willing to do his part and was a two-gapper more often than he necessarily probably wanted to be. He did his part for the team. Unlike the 2 guys I looked at before, he is a high motor guy. He doesn't give up on the ball carrier. And you can tell it's harder for him because he is a bigger guy, but he is working hard out there. He doesn't give up on the play. He also, like some of the other guys I looked at already, he has position versatility, but he's not an edge defender, but he played all along the defensive line itself. He also has pretty quick, decisive movements, both off the line of scrimmage and while engaging with blockers. He's good at shedding blockers with a spin move, and he has long arms that aid a powerful bull rush. The negatives with Rashard Lawrence, so this is the big one, is the injury history I was talking about. NFL teams are going to be wary of it, especially since they don't have as much time to meet with players this season, or this offseason, I mean. He also had poor technique when asked to rush or run defend on the move, so running to the outside was tough for him, and he doesn't have good body control. Another thing that he struggles with, as Austin was just talking about, Ross Blacklock was destroying double teams in his games. Rashard Lawrence, on the other hand, was really struggling with double teams. And I do understand double teams are difficult to combat, but he doesn't approach them with the right technique. He just stops and just tries to anchor, and it doesn't work too well. His twitchy and quick motion can also work against him as a tackler. He's not very sure-handed. And as I mentioned, that poor lateral quickness makes him a liability on those outside runs. And on top of that, he's not very helpful as a loop or twisting guy on stunt blitzes as well. That poor footwork overall is going to get him knocked over a lot. And he's not a dynamic pass rusher or a great technician at this point. So he's not going to be a guy that's putting up huge sack numbers in his NFL career. So overall, assuming that his medical issues check out, Rashard Lawrence is going to be a solid find for an NFL team. He's one of those guys that the rest of the team is going to like, and he's sure to be respected based on the way he plays and how much pain he's willing to play through for the team. He has some room to grow as far as his technique goes, and he can occasionally get into the backfield with a good bull rush, but he's not all that consistent. He has the size to be a nose guard in the NFL, but he did play the majority of his college snaps at 3-4 defensive end. I have a feeling he could probably do both at the top level, but again, he's not going to be a dynamic pass rusher. At best, he's a good run-stopping rotational piece. It's kind of hard to project these players these days because some teams place a bigger emphasis on run plugging than others. I see Lawrence as a mid-round guy. I've seen some places say that he's as high as a third-round pick. I could see that, but I think he's more likely a late fourth, early fifth round guy, especially with the medical questions and lack of answers due to the COVID-19 outbreak. I could see him being pushed down because of that, but I think he's a solid overall player. I definitely don't hate what I saw from Rashard Lawrence. And I watched his games against Georgia from 2018 and 2 games from Texas and Auburn in 2019. There was considerable improvement in the final 2 games I watched, so he definitely got better over this past season compared to previous years. So that was Rashard Lawrence from LSU. You have 2 guys left. Do you want to talk about Benito Jones or Robert Windsor?
I'm going to go with Benito Jones first. Benito Jones is from Ole Miss or Mississippi, however you want to say it. He's 6'1" and 316 pounds. He was a big deal coming out of high school in Mississippi as the Class 5A Defensive Player of the Year and a top 50 overall recruit in the nation. The Rebels were able to keep him in his home state, and he was able to secure some immediate playing time, starting 4 of 12 games in his true freshman season, making 29 tackles with 4.5 for a loss. In 2017, he started 10 of 12 games, making another 29 tackles, 7.5 for loss, and 1.5 sacks. In 2018, he was able to improve in all statistics, hitting career highs in tackles with 34, tackles for a loss with 9, and 3 sacks. In 2019, he was able to secure recognition for his play, getting second-team all-conference honors after leading his team in tackles for a loss with 10, having 5.5 sacks and 30 tackles and 10 starts through 12 games. So the good things about Jones is that he's a classic DT with a broad, thick chest and good musculation on his arms, stuffing the middle of the line to prevent rushers from getting through. And he did that pretty effectively, showing enough lateral quickness and leverage off blocks to be able to get off them and make some tackles. He has been described as a great football character, being brought up humbly, working on a farm like James Washington was, and he shows that country strength and durability when he plays. Then he's able to adjust based on who his opponent is and play to whatever scheme they're on. Last 2 things that he uses his hands effectively, working onto the edge, and his arm over often wins into the A-gaps off the snap. Negatives, the biggest negatives have got to be his athleticism and endurance. By the end of the games I watched, he looked gassed out there, and he was another guy not getting many snaps through the game. Anyhow, back to his athleticism, he had a pretty bad combine, finishing worst among defensive linemen in both the 40-yard dash and 20-yard shuttle, and also finishing second worst in the 3-cone drill and third worst in the vertical. Normally, the vertical doesn't really matter that much, but at 6'1", Jones is lacking length a bit already, so being able to get up there would have been good for him to show that even if he's blocked, well, at least he can get into throwing lanes. I think all the athleticism stuff all comes from really the same problem, and that's that he is top-heavy and needs to add more musculation to his legs. I don't think adding mass would be good for him, but if he was able to stay at the same weight by losing some weight in the top half and adding muscle to his legs, I think it'd really benefit his game. It also contributes to why he's inconsistent in setting an anchor against down blocks and double teams, so that that should help there as well if he just adds a little bit more musculation to his legs. Last thing is he can be limited if he has to do 2-gap at the NFL level. So Lance Sirloin compared him to DJ Jones of the 49ers, and that's actually a really good comparison, with DJ Jones being a little bit more athletic. I think scouts were prepared for a not very good combine from Benito Jones, but I don't think they were prepared for it that bad. I honestly didn't think he would have such combine stats after watching his tape. Maybe it was just a bad day for him. I don't know. Despite what others think, I don't think Benito offers much as a pass rushing option, especially once at the next level. I didn't really see much. Maybe it was just the games I watched, but I mean, I don't see it. I don't think that at the NFL level he's going to be able to do any better. So I think he's just meant to be like a Damone Harrison, a guy that's really good against the run. Harrison did start off as an undrafted free agent, though, but that's mostly because of his level of competition combined with poor combine results. So I think Benito Jones didn't do much better than that. I think in terms of where he's going to get drafted, I think he will go in the 5th round and has potential for the late 4th, but I think the combine kind of pushed him out of the 4th. I think he's more a 5th rounder now because of it. I don't think teams were ready for that bad. So, again, that was Benito Jones out of Ole Miss. I watched versus Arkansas in 2019, versus LSU in 2019, and then I also watched his highlights. There wasn't much tape on him. I couldn't really find much. Usually I watch 2 highlights when that happens, but there wasn't even 2 highlights made for him. So I was only able to watch those 3. Who is your last prospect?
The last guy I was taking a look at was Leki Fotu from Utah. The big man, standing at 6'5" and 330 pounds, was a former member of the USA national rugby team and only played 1 year of football in high school, and he was an all-state player in Utah, so that's pretty darn good. Still learning the game. He only played in 5 games as a freshman in 2016. Finally got on the field a lot more in 2017, playing in 13 games with 2 starts and 22 tackles, 3.5 for a loss. He burst onto the scene in 2018, becoming a first-team all-conference member with 14 games and 13 starts. 33 tackles, 5.5 for a loss, and 3 sacks. And last season, he was a 3rd-team All-American, 1st-team All-Pac-12 in 13 games and starts with 29 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, and 2 pass breakups with 1.5 sacks. The big thing with Leki Fotu is he has a massive frame. That's something you notice right away. One of the great things you see, and he carries his weight relatively well. He has thick arms and a powerful lower body. He's just a physically imposing man, and he's intimidating to look at. And he's got a relatively good game motor and effort for someone that's as large as he is. With someone that big, as you might expect, it's pretty dang hard to move him. Even stronger offensive linemen are going to struggle to move him on singular one-on-one blocks. And he has a powerful initial pop when he gets his hands on someone. He has good hand placement and good athleticism for someone that's 330 pounds. He is willing to travel to the boundary for running plays, and he played in multiple fronts, so he can 2-gap and attack in a slanting defense. The negatives for Fotu, though, the way he gets out of his stance is kind of bizarre. He gets too high with that 6'5" height, and he's not quick enough to make plays in the backfield consistently. His pad level was an issue with his base as well. He has a narrow base, so he got bumped off his angle way too often. And he also hasn't figured out how to anchor against double teams. He got manhandled on a couple plays against, I think it was USC. It was either USC or Oregon, where he got manhandled on a couple touchdown plays, a couple long touchdown runs. So that was disappointing to see. Also, his feet stopped turning at times. I thought that was very bizarre. He also had, even though he has strong hands, they were inconsistent. He wasn't always using them the right way. And he's not a pass rushing threat at all. He lacks a plan and doesn't have the physical tools as a rusher and doesn't use them to his advantage. So overall, Leki Fotu has an NFL-ready frame with good strength and the room to add a little more as well, and is a decent athlete given his weight. But that being said, he was put in positions to make a lot more of an impact in college, and he never really did that. Technique improvement should make him a solid 2-gapping, run-stuffing defensive tackle, but he offers practically nothing as a pass rusher, and frankly, I found his tape to be relatively lackluster. He does have a place in this league, but he's never going to be an elite player. Frankly, I think Daniel McCullers is a pretty solid comparison to him at the pro level, but I'm not even sure he has that type of upside. He's a two-gapper at best, is the way I see him. So definitely serves a purpose, and he is what the Steelers are looking for. That's what they are missing mostly right now is a true nose tackle that's a run stopper. But I'm not sure if that's something that's going to be a long-term replacement. But it is something. So Leki Fotu from Utah was the last guy I took a look at. We have one man left, and it's Robert Windsor, last man standing. Tell us a little bit about him.
He's from Penn State. He is 6'4" and 290 pounds. Windsor was an all-state pick coming out of high school in Wisconsin and ended up committing to Penn State. As a true freshman in 2016, he started 1 of 14 games and amassed 23 tackles, with 1.5 being for a loss. The next season, he played in all 13 games, getting 19 tackles, 2 sacks, and 3 fumble recoveries. In 2018, he was finally able to become a starter, starting 12 games and getting 39 tackles, 11 for a loss, 7.5 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles, which was enough to get him an honorable mention All-Big Ten pick, but not more. I wrote the stuff down before watching his tape, so here's a news flash. I was disappointed, but he was in the 2019 season. He was able to secure 13 All-Big Ten accolades for worst stats for his 40 tackles, 5 for a loss, and 3.5 sacks through 13 starts in his senior season. He had an extra game, and all he got was 1 more tackle. So I don't know what happened there. And when I was typing it out, I was like, this man must have had the most insane pressure I've ever seen. But I have no idea how he got no recognition besides the honorable pick for the year before and then got anything for this season. He didn't even deserve honorable, in my opinion. But regardless, following the season, he declared for the draft. So what's good about him is I liked his toughness. He's another guy that has played hurt because he wants to be in there in the trenches with his teammates. He also has adequate play strength to be able to win one-on-one blocks. Then his agility is above average, especially within the pocket, playing with loose hips and running like a tight end in pursuit. Then his block shedding is pretty decent. Once he sees the runner, he's pretty good at getting off the block. Speaking of going against blockers, there were games like the game against Iowa where he flashed some winning wrist control as a pass rusher. Then the last thing is that he is quick enough to disrupt plays in the backside gaps. So on the negative side, something that came over both in his 2018 and 2019 tape was how he played against the run. A lot of plays I saw he would be in position to make a play and just didn't. His tape was very frustrating for that reason because I felt like his block shedding to get in position was decent, but it never felt like he tried as hard against the run. Also, I know he's a DT, but his pursuit angles are bad too when he tries to get back into a play, mostly just wasting energy out there. Then he's another guy that's a little undersized. He also weighs 290 pounds like Blacklock does, but he is taller than Blacklock, so he can afford to put on a little bit more weight because he doesn't have NFL mass right now. Combining that with his lack of power into his initial strike, it makes it hard for him to maintain his gap, especially against extra blockers. On normal plays, he allows himself to be reached and stacked too, not just with extra blockers. Then the last thing is he is not a consistent hand fighter and is definitely not a quick win hand fighter, as a lot of his pass rush production came along after the initial snap. So overall, I liked Windsor's 2018 tape a hell of a lot better than his 2019 tape, which really confused me again how the board of coaches decided he should be recognized for his play in 2019 with third team and then honorable mention the year before when his stats were way better. I just felt like it was a huge step back for him in his 2019 season. He looked so much better in 2018, at least as a pass rusher. If he came out last year, I probably would have given him a late 4th round or early 5th round grade, but now I see him as a 7th rounder with teams looking to see if they get him to return to that 2018 season. So for him, I watched his game versus Pittsburgh in 2019 versus Iowa in 2018 and his highlights. He was another guy that I didn't have a lot of tape on, but I felt like I got a good enough read on him. So with that being said, how would you rank your prospects?
All right. So to start, I have Leki Fotu. He's a late day 2 to mid day 3 selection right now. It's still a little rich in my opinion just because he is a 2-gapping run stopper. I find it unlikely he'd be better than Daniel McCullers in 2020. But the fact of the matter is he plays more of a true nose tackle, or he's closer, more likely to do so. So that's what you need mostly, more than any other defensive line position, and he fits that. So even though I wasn't crazy impressed, he does fit a need. Rashard Lawrence is similar to that. The growth from 2018 to 2019 was quite apparent on tape. Even though I like him as a guy, as a defensive lineman, a little more than Leki Fotu, I think he's a little more I think he's a little more dynamic. Not even dynamic. That's not even the right word. I think there's a little more to his game, but Lawrence rarely played nose tackle in college, and he doesn't project as well to what the Steelers need as a guy like Fotu does. So, given that being the case, that's why I have Lawrence here. And then there's a clear difference between those top two guys and my bottom two guys. Third, I have Nick Coe from Auburn. He just doesn't fit in super well here. Again, the Steelers need a nose tackle, and that's the one thing Coe definitely didn't do in college. He'd be an interesting hybrid player on the edge at a 3-4 defensive end, but the Steelers don't really need that this year. They have an abundance of players at that position right now. If he somehow lasts as an undrafted free agent, which I doubt, then go ahead, but I just don't see it. And then last I have Malcolm Roach. I'm sorry, but from what I saw, he's just not very talented, and he physically should project as a two-gapping nose guard and not a 3-4 defensive end or edge linebacker, which is all he played in college. And the tape just was not there for me. So if he's an undrafted free agent, sure, bring him in, but I just was not overly impressed with him from what I saw.
I do apologize about the dog. He's really annoying.
That's
so
okay.
Sorry about that. But ranking the prospects for me, I had Justin Matabuke first. He reminded me of Javon Hargrave, and that's really what it came down to. Is like I felt like he could be what Hargrave was for the Steelers, and I just enjoyed his tape. His tape was really good. I liked how he performed against double teams, even though sometimes he got flattened. But I mean, most of the time it was good. I'm not sure he's going to be there for the Steelers pick, but he was my favorite. Same goes for Ross Blacklock. I ranked him second. Only because it feels like a gamble with Blacklock. Like, his tape was, I think, better than Matabuke's. I felt like like I said, I don't think Matabuke could have ever been a top 15 pick, but I think if Ross Blacklock showed that he could do what he did for a second season after the ACL tear, I think he could have been a top 15 pick in next year's draft. But it's still a gamble because you don't know. He only had 1 year of really good production. I mean, in his freshman year, he won freshman he was co-defensive freshman of the year, but I mean, you know, it still wasn't big stats. It was just freshman stats, you know. So I have him second because I'm a gambling man, and I think I really like what he can prove. And if he was there for the Steelers pick, he might not be there for the Steelers pick too. He's like a guy that might be gone in the first 10 picks of the second round. But if he's there for the Steelers pick, I'd be excited. I'd be okay with it. So it's like I said, a gamble. But yeah, after him, I have Benito Jones from Ole Miss. He's more of a classic DT. It's a dying off position just to play against the run, and I know that he's not a DT, but they just got Chris Wormley, who's meant for basically just against the run. He doesn't really offer much pass rush. So, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to bring Benito Jones in. It was just like, I feel like the Steelers should be getting another guy that's more like Matabuke, more like Hargrave, more like Blacklock, like those guys that are more dual threats, and then maybe try and improve their how they perform against the run later. But Benito Jones, I wouldn't be mad at. I do think he's going to be more of a value pick because he's going to be later in the draft, like something like the 5th round or so. And he could go even later because his combine was so bad. Again, though, I still think teams were prepared for that, at least in some capacity, just not as bad. So I don't think his draft stock is actually going to fall too much from it, just enough to push him from the late 4th to the early 5th. But could be later. And that leaves Robert Windsor last. I was just very unimpressed with his tape. Even his 2018 tape wasn't exactly great. It took, like, the game against Iowa, people uploaded because he got a sack in it, but the sack was very unimpressive. It took very long to develop, and it was just like, well, he's holding on to the ball for a long time. It was like a coverage sack, is what I'm saying. So I don't see a lot of value in Robert Windsor at the moment. I mean, if he's undrafted free agent, which at the moment it could be, there's a chance, I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I don't know what it is. I maybe I should go in my free time and watch Yetur Gross-Matos. I don't know if I said his name right, but from the years of doing this, I haven't liked any Penn State defensive lineman. I looked at a couple. I know I looked at Kevin Givens, and I hated him, and I think I just talked about him recently on the podcast because I said people had him going in like the 4th round or 5th round, and I said he'd be undrafted free agent, and he actually wasn't undrafted free agent because he was bad. And that's kind of like how I view it. So I don't know. I just don't like Penn State defensive linemen for some reason. Anyhow, yeah, so that's it.
Alrighty then. So that was interior defensive lineman. So now let's get to some news to talk about. First, we're living in a wild times, my friend, in case you can't tell. As of 6:44 p.m. from today, which was Saturday, Roosevelt Nix signing a contract with the Indianapolis Colts was the top story on NFL.com.
That's wild. I mean, we were just waiting for like the top free agents to sign still. Like, you still got Everson Griffin out there and stuff. And
The
I guess
Steelers
Roosevelt
still
Nix
haven't
is as
signed
big as
Jameis Winston
it gets
either.
at the moment.
And the Steelers still haven't signed Jameis Winston.
Oh yeah, I mean it's coming. Wait for it. $24 million deal. They're gonna cut everyone. They're cutting Roethlisberger, I heard, for Jameis.
Yeah, exactly. Not a lot of NFL news to talk about. There's a few things though, so let's start with that. Actually, I didn't have this written down. I forgot about it, but our poor man Brandon Cooks got traded once again. This time from the Rams to the Texans for what was it? A second round pick?
Yeah, it was for the Texans' second-round pick, and they get back a 2022 fourth. Nothing gets Bill O'Brien going than offering a fourth-round pick.
Did he really get a fourth round pick? I didn't even see that. I just saw Cooks in the second.
No, he got Cooks in the 2022 fourth.
Oh yeah, there it is. So what do you think about the move for both teams?
I mean, he's only going to have to pay Cooks $8 million this year, but they used the pick that they got from the DeAndre Hopkins trade, I'm pretty sure. So it's just like it's such a downgrade. And I know they got the 2022 fourth, but Brandon Cooks is so overpaid. I know it's only going to cost $8 million this year, but next year I forget the cap hits. The Rams had to pay Cooks some of his salary, which is why it only hits $8 million this year for the Texans. But like next year, I'm pretty sure it goes back up to 13, and that's a lot for Brandon Cooks. So maybe the Texans will try and trade him again, and he'll keep moving, getting traded to his fourth team, or is it fifth? It's fourth. It's fourth. Okay, but regardless, it's just so tough. After the DeAndre Hopkins trade, there's basically nothing they can do that's going to make trading for a wide receiver look good. It wasn't necessarily a bad trade, but I don't know. They also don't have any draft picks, and they're going to have to start paying their team soon.
Yeah, so there's several ways we have to look at this. Number one is for the Rams. We know they have to offload some contracts because they have their big paydays kicking in, and I think this was kind of expected. The fact that they got a second-round pick for him, I think, is not bad considering the type of year he had last year. He had a career low in receptions, second worst career receiving yards, and the worst touchdown mark he's ever had, and they got a second-round pick for that.
Yeah, that's not bad, and they didn't even have to give up a 2021 fourth. They gave up a fourth-round pick that's 2 years from now. So, like, they don't even have worries. And, I mean, I thought the value was there. Otherwise, the Rams got rid of their second-round pick, didn't they? Didn't they get rid of it in the Jalen Ramsey trade? I don't know. I know they don't have first for years to come, but
it's something.
I think it's good that they got more draft capital, especially when they don't have money to pay players. They need to be getting rookies and drafting really well so that they have cheap contracts for at least a little bit.
Yeah, so this is a step in the right direction for them. And for the Texans, they get a solid receiver, but he's not anything more than a low end number one wide receiver and a solid number two. That's another tough move for the Texans.
Yeah, it's not good. But, I mean, again, I think the Rams won this because you look at the class right now. You look at this wide receiver class, and if the Rams want to go wide receiver with that pick that they just got, there's going to be someone good there. There's going to be someone that you might actually get first-round value from someone with that second-round pick. So, in all, you're getting a cheaper guy that if you do it right, you might get a really good player for years to come. I mean, you could say that about any NFL draft pick. But all I'm saying is for this class of wide receivers, it was good to get rid of a very expensive wide receiver that's oft injury-prone. It's just I think the Rams won this trade.
And then the last way to look at this is Brandon Cooks. This is now his fourth NFL team. He had 3 solid years with the Saints, the 1 productive year with the Patriots, 1 good year with the Rams, and then last year wasn't all that good. Would you be concerned about it if you were getting Brandon Cooks? Would you be concerned because you look at him and you say, fourth team in like 6 years, there might be an issue here. What's the deal?
Yeah, it's a little odd like that. I just think people worry about his health. because obviously he's only missed, I believe, 2 games this past season, but it's like full games. But he's missed a lot of time. Like he'll like exit the game early and losing snaps at the end. I think that he's just off to injury prone, and it plays into his value.
Indeed. Let's continue on now. We're talking about Drew Brees. So he agreed to join NBC Sports as a football analyst when he retires from the NFL for Football Night in America, going along with Mike Tirico, Mike Florio, Chris Sims, Rodney Harrison, Tony Dungy, and host Liam McHugh. The expectation is that in time he will take over for current color commentator on Sunday Night Football, Chris Collinsworth, so that's kind of interesting. And he was originally expected to sign with ESPN, but now he is going to NBC.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, good for him. He's securing his bag even after he's done with football. I mean, I'm sure he's going to get a nasty, massive contract like Tony Romo did.
Man, ESPN can't get anybody. They suck.
Honestly, and they need it more than anyone. That's what really sucks. They're probably being really cheap or something. I don't know. Because they need the actual good commentators more than anyone. And I mean, I guess there's no guarantee Drew Brees will be good because we haven't seen him actually do it, but ESPN needs to secure people better than Booger McFarland.
Yeah, it's been awful, absolutely awful. But anyways, that's a conversation for another time. Shockingly, the NFL's competition committee, I say that matter-of-factly, has decided to not proceed with another season of their lovely pass interference reviews. They also shot down a couple of proposals for a sky judge in the NFL, like we saw in the XFL and the AAF before that. So apparently we've learned nothing, and it's not a popular decision among coaches, the sky judge, that is. So I guess as far as the sky judge goes, the NFL sticks its nose up at a good idea again, just like it did last year. And as far as the pass interference reviews go, I think it's the right decision as far as that goes, but it was just mangled from the start.
Yeah, they messed it up. I feel like it could have been decent. I mean, it was still very annoying that it was based off one play. But, like, it was done so poorly. You don't know, with whatever crew you were getting, you didn't know what was challengeable and what was not. You were getting different answers. Different things were pass interference. Different things were not pass interference. It made no sense. It had no basis. It felt like not everyone was on the same page. And it just, at the end of the day, it didn't work. The sky judges is a shame. The sky judges, I don't understand why they don't want sky judges, but it's really just a shame.
Oh, it has to be because of the transparency. I feel like that's what it is.
Yeah, probably, to be honest. Like, why would we want to be transparent when we can't be? When we cannot be?
It's bad. But we're stuck with it for now, at least for the next season. And then the last thing to talk about is, speaking of the sky judge and the former leagues it was a part of, this is not NFL news, but the XFL suspended operations yesterday and laid off a large percentage of its staff and employees, and the future of the league is in serious doubt. According to ESPN, a conference call including a bunch of members from the league, some of them said that there are no plans to return in 2021, as was originally the case when they stopped their season due to the coronavirus outbreak. And they also said the biggest reason for likely closing up shop for good is because of the damage done and the damage that will likely continue to be done to the economy in the wake of the societal shutdown, in the wake of the outbreak. And I guess I hadn't thought of it that way, but I guess that's kind of a good point. And just like that, spring football is cursed forever.
AAF was better. AAF lasted more games. That's just a fact. But yeah, it's unfortunate circumstances. XFL was at least doing better advertising and pulling people wise and stuff. So it is a shame that it's going to go. But, I mean, it's just not destined to be. Spring football is just never meant to happen.
And I think you and I were kind of similar in the aspect where, we paid attention to it at least somewhat, but we definitely weren't as invested in it. And I think a big part of that is that we did have our trust broken with the AAF last year, and it just hurt to try to think about wanting to get invested in like that again, because you knew in the back of your head that there was a good chance that wasn't going to happen again.
That's exactly what prevented me. Like, I picked the New York Guardians. I looked to see if they won I was checking on scores, but like I actually watched Fleet games when the Fleet existed. Like I was sitting down, I was watching, I was rooting for players and stuff. I mean, I was still rooting for players. Like obviously, I still liked Mikhail McKay, but that was because I didn't any original XFL player. I didn't know their name. I didn't know who they were. I was rooting for former AAF players I liked, like Mikhail McKay and stuff like that. But I mean, it is what it is, I guess. Just spring football is not destined to be.
And if you try it too much, you get a global pandemic. So let it be a lesson to us all. So,
man, yeah.
Would you be surprised if, depending on like how things go in the next few years, say the economy does rebound relatively quickly, that we could see this a third time?
I'm sure someone will try it somewhere in the future. Might be Vince McMahon again. It might not be. Well, I guess we'll have to see. I'm sure someone will say, we're going to be different, and they're going to try and they're going to fail like everyone else has.
In the meantime, NFL is still king, and we'll continue to talk about the draft as we approach just under 2 weeks now. In the meantime, if you have any questions about the show, please email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com and check out our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. We post our episodes on SoundCloud and YouTube. Austin, thank you so much for joining me today, and everyone have a terrific Easter Sunday. Stay safe out there. Continue to wash your hands and practice good hygiene and social distancing. Thank you so much, Austin, and I hope you all have a terrific Easter and a great day.
Bye. Happy Easter.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.